I'm working on a stretched piece of canvas that's 20 by 20, just so you guys know. So boing, stretched. Um, Sometimes I work on masonite, sometimes I work on stretched canvas, sometimes I work on a panel, a cradle panel. I tend to like a little bit of give. A lot of people like the really firm. It becomes a very personal thing. I also did a little bit of a drawing, started to approximate the drawing. And when I draw for painting, it's different than when I draw for drawing. When I draw and I know I'm going to be painting over it, I just make marks and hopefully they're right. And so kind of sketched with one of these Tromboy pens. I like it because this part of the pen is almost like a brush. You can kind of go thick. You can kind of almost paint with it if you want. So if I wanted to, I could start putting in my darks. And it's water soluble. So if you make a mistake, you can just take a little water and a rag and wipe it off. And terp, just regular terp, doesn't affect it at all. See it? Doesn't affect it at all. So it's a nice little tool to draw with. Sometimes I draw with a brush, and it's kind of what I have at hand and how I feel on that particular day. So we're doing a harvesting from Sonoma County, from a lot of my vineyard workers that I did. I thought this was nice and decided to put it into a square format because I don't need a whole bunch of stuff behind him. So we're going to start with the sky, as I usually do, and a little terp, a little medium, a lot of white, and maybe a touch of Naples yellow. Now you wonder, I'm going to keep the sky slightly yellow, and it'll harmonize better with the rest of the painting. Because if you look at it, the sky looks white. The reason the sky looks white, there actually is a reason for that. The light is coming from way back there. It's not coming directly, but it's coming from back there. So this part of the sky is actually lighter than this part of the sky. But the sky is where the light is coming from. The light is not coming from here. If the light were coming from this point, the sky would be bluer. All right. So we know that. So I thought I'd at least explain that part of it going in. So there's our white. I always have a little extra white handy. It's interesting. I laid out my palette before I really knew what I was going to paint. And I usually don't do that. And so I had it down to 3 images, and talking with Anna before I started, she said, why don't you do harvest, since it's kind of harvest time. So that's how I kind of landed on this image. So immediately I looked at the image and I went, boy, I got to lay some yellow out, some real yellow, because I had a Naples and a ochre, but I didn't have anything to give me the brilliance that I was going to need. So I added a little bit of cad yellow hue, and that I assumed would solve that particular problem, and I think it will. It's just, so I'm kind of getting a sky, and it'll give me something to relate to. Gives me something to relate, and I like to paint over things. I've said this many times, and I'll tell you what. Something I learned. I'm teaching a class right now called Urban Landscape, and it's very hard when you get students that draw pretty darn well, and they really spend a lot of time getting their drawing down, and then they neatly paint in up to those lines that they drew. And it's hard to get people to trust themselves a little bit more. And the only way that I have found that I can do it is to, in another class I happen to teach, not this semester, but that I started years ago. And I started it for the reason that I just stated. And that is that I saw a lot of students. I learn a lot, by the way, I learn a hell of a lot from students. But I saw students spending 30, 40 minutes getting a drawing down that was really nice, really well drawn, either well proportioned if it was figure, or well with accurate perspective if it were a landscape or anything of that nature. And then they would neatly, almost like it was a paint by number, like those lines were a map of exactly where you had to paint. And if you went over those lines, you'd be violating all that drawing that you did. And so along the way, when I was teaching down south years ago, I noticed this. I kind of came up with the idea of giving them shorter periods of time so they couldn't sit there. I mean, if you give somebody a 25-minute painting, you can't take 30 minutes into a drawing. And so what I found is by shortening that time frame, people would begin to learn how to trust themselves a little bit more. And so that was the idea. So when I do these 90-minute, paintings that we're doing, I'm approaching it a little like a quick study because I'm working larger. And this isn't really large. This is kind of, medium. And that brings up a whole other issue that I should at least talk a little bit about. And that,
do your palette first before I
Yeah.
think I got it.
hang on, I'm going to squeeze that a little bit more white because I'm ripping through it much faster than I thought I would. So there's a whole bunch more. All right. Titanium white is my palette. Naples yellow, light. Cad light hue, cad yellow, light hue. Yellow ochre. Cad red or cad orange hue. Alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue. I have a brilliant blue laid out. I don't know. Yeah, I think I will need it now that I look at it. Sap green, burnt umber, and I have a little raw sienna laid out just because I just bought a new tube of it and I wanted to lay it out. It's not a real good reason, but what the heck. So that's basically my palette. Now we're going to kind of get this mountain range back
Did you
in.
say sienna was out there too?
Excuse me?
Burnt sienna was out
No,
there?
I do not have burnt sienna.
What was the last one?
What? Raw sienna.
Raw sienna. Okay. I thought I had it on.
You heard the sienna part right.
Okay.
So we're kind of putting in these background hills, probably a little darker than I wanted to now that I look at them, but whatever, a little bit. I'm going to throw a little bit of Naples into that, maybe a little yellow too, just for the hell of it. See if I can change it up. Just, yeah, that feels a little too green, but it's not bad. I always figure, get it in there, be wrong, fix it later. And on these quick ones, that's later means if you have a chance. So it doesn't always mean you're going to get to it. I'm going to lighten it up a little bit as we move to the right, just because I see it that way. Paint too much. Don't paint too little, because then you're going to have to go back and fix it. So if you paint too much, all you got to do is cover what you did. So I'm going to go for the kind of background trees, which tend to be green, but they're not an obvious green, and they're a little darker than the mountains. Now, how much darker? Let's test. Not enough. A little more brown, a little more green to that same color. The reason I put brown in is it takes the green down. In other words, the green, it's like adding a little bit of a complement. It's not as harsh. The green will not be as obvious. It'll have a flavor of green, but let's see, we're going to put it right here, up in here, maybe add a little ultramarine to it, a little yellow. Let's try that. Feeling like I can do, I like that. So I'm looking up here. I realize sometimes myself and other artists that demonstrate start painting, and we really we're looking at things, and sometimes, because I've watched other artists demonstrate, and sometimes we don't tell you what we're looking at. A little darker down in here, a little bit as it moves down, just a little bit darker. Same here, a little darker, just push it right into that. Geez, I just realized the way I'm talking, I sound like Bob Ross. I don't mean to. I'm going just a little bit here, just a little bit there. Yeah. Either that or I feel like I'm talking to my grandson. Just a little here, a little there. Make it look good. That's the line I use a lot in class. The whole concept is that it has to look good when it's done. I mean, that's not far-reaching concept, by the way. It's just sometimes people get enamored with what they're painting, and they kind of forget that really what they're trying to do is just create a nice painting on the canvas and make the thing work. And that's one of the reasons that I really profess getting back from. It's really nice when I'm with a group of students. I'm saying that because at Academy, we're back on site and I've got students in class, and it's wonderful to be able to say to them, okay, step back. And I'm watching them, so I know they're stepping back. You're not back far enough. Get back. No, squint. And it makes an enormous difference. I really can't say it enough, for people to really get back from what they're working on. Because it's really, we're hung up. Like my head is about 18 inches away from the canvas right now. And so as I paint this area right here that I'm painting, I don't see this area. But if I step back far enough, I see them all at the same time. And that's the advantage of getting back. And that's how you look at a painting. You don't look at the individual parts of the painting unless you have the painting already working. Painting's already working, then great. Get down on those individual parts. Now we're going from back to front. Now we're going to start with some intensity. We're going to go with a little bit more sap. I'm going to mix it right into that color. So it's, in other words, it's not too strong. And maybe I'll bring a little ochre or add a little yellow into it. And we're going to go for kind of the green. That's pretty good. I'm going to throw a little ultramarine to it. It's going to darken it, and it'll still stay green. I can add a little bit more life to that green. So I'm going to add some yellow, maybe a little bit of Naples, because it might be a little dark. Let's do it one more time. And that's good, where we're going to stay. That's how we're going to start, at least. So we're going to start to get some of these more intense greens into it. Not the real intense, because that's going to be the bright yellow and all that heading it, but some of the under colors. Remember, you're layering as you paint. You're not painting detail and painting all the information below that. Behind that, you're building. So you're building your painting. If you build it, they will come. Hopefully they'll come. But it's cool to try. And all you're doing, and it's not a difficult concept to understand. All you're doing is you're basically, until you decide that you want to change things, you're basically painting the colors and the values and the shapes that are in front of you. Now, those are three things to think about. And again, it sounds simple, and I guarantee it's not. It's not that simple. If it were, think about it. Everybody would be a great painter. If it were that simple. Now, it's like basically learning to play a piano. You just learn the basic, where the keys are, how to hit them. So you hit the chords, how to hit a melody with your other hand, and automatically you're a piano player. Not necessarily a good one.
So Lynn would like to know, when you say add life to the color, do you mean chroma?
Yeah. Intensity. You say chroma. I learned it when I was in school as intensity, but chroma and intensity are pretty much the same thing. In other words, brightness. So we're just kind of popping down these kind of a little bit more intense greens. Get a little darker, probably go a little darker there than I am. I'm going to throw some brown and some green back into that same color. So I went a little darker. Oh, there it is. You see it? A little bit. That's probably a little too dark now that I look at it, but I'm going to stay with it. You don't have to be 100% right. You have to be close. And the whole thing has to look good as a unit. So you can think, well, I got all the colors right. Well, you did, but maybe you missed some of the value contrast. Ain't it fun? Got a lot to think about when you paint. Let alone composition. We haven't talked about that. The composition is something that is established really before you begin. The only thing you can do to enhance composition is color and value. Once you've already got your composition down, you can play something down or play something up. Okay, just keep moving. That's my whole thing in doing quicker paintings, whether you're on location, and I always relate what I do to plein air, but when you're on location, you're not doing a long painting, generally speaking. I mean, some people do a little bit longer than other people, but generally it's maximum about 3 hours. You know, generally, that doesn't mean it's always. And in 3 hours, you've got to keep moving. You can't just sit back and admire what you've done. Let's go a little darker, blue and brown into the same color. A little bit more on the blue side. Probably a little too brown there, but let's get the deeper colors back here. Now you notice I'm holding back on the bright, the yellow greens, the shimmering. That's occurring on top, because what happens is those leaves are a color. If you think about it, whatever you're painting, it is what it is. It's a local color in a daylight situation. The minute you add sun to it, that local color, the brightness sits on top of basically whatever that local color was. So if you lay the local color in and you get that in there pretty accurate, then as you go along, you pretty much, as I like to say, turn the lights on. So you don't start with those lights turned on. I don't start. You know what? Every time I say this, I'm giving you what I do, because I do know artists that go the other way and get it to work.
Meaning?
Where they'll lay the brightest light and the darkest dark right at the beginning. I've never had success at that, or that I can recall. Maybe I did. I just don't recall having. And I work much better if I save. Now I'm adding some pretty darks down in here, but if I save some of those lights and darks more for the completion of the piece, the punches, as I like to think of it, just punch it at the end. Emphasize. I don't mean this. But you don't want to dwell. I don't want to sit there. I want to approximate it. That's why I use that phrase, paint like you know what you're doing and assume you're wrong. That's pretty much my philosophy, the way I paint. I just go ahead with reckless abandon. And then at some time during the painting, I will slow down and really go, is that really working? Or do I really need to do something different? And, there's, until you have to get to a certain point in your painting before you can almost realize the true answer to that question. So some warms back in there. So I'm going to take this raw sienna, add a little orange to it. I do see some little warms sneaking back in. And this is what I call spicing it up, giving it flavor. So it isn't just green on green on green. That's something that's a pet peeve of mine when I look at other art. If it's just the color on the color on the color. And, I am referring to art that's in the realistic vein, not necessarily stylized or graphic art. That's a different story.
So Linnea has a question. Would you say background should always be light blue to reflect the atmosphere and perspective?
No.
Try to keep cooler violets in the background.
Are you talking about daytime? Because, it's not the case if we're talking about different times of the day or different types of lighting. If we're talking with sunlight, then there's a way of thinking when you do sunlight. If you're talking, I'm going to go real dark now. That's a bunch of dirty paint on my hands. But it depends upon what you are painting. If you're painting what would I call it? Something like a
to show distance, basically.
Panorama, where you're painting a distance, you're painting a vista. Okay, then what you're asking is true, provided it is the right time of day, or it's not cloudy. Sometimes this is yellow, so it isn't necessarily, it's the furthest thing back, but it's not necessarily blue. So there are color harmonies that you will find over. I can give you formulas, and then I can tell you how those formulas won't work. It all works if you approach it properly. I'm gonna go back to a line that I use to help answer that question. Is as best I can, and that is that value does the work and color gets the credit. One of the things that I found is there are too many young painters or painters that don't have a lot of experience that take a color course, and they get totally hung up in the, because it's, boy, I understand how you can do it, get totally hung up in the concept of color. And it's wonderful. It's great. But if you get too scientific with your thinking, then you actually cause yourself a little bit of difficulty as you move along. So in my opinion, and it's an opinion, take that for what it's worth. In my opinion, I trust being wrong on the color and right on the value. And then if I want to, I will change the color. Now, I've been painting for a long time, so I understand color schemes that work, how I can get to the value I want to get. So that goes without saying. But in general, one of the things you've got to think about is that aspect, that value does the work. I really mean that. And color, and I wish I would have come up, I wish I would have been the person that, and I don't know who it was, but man, it's one thing, if you know, and I don't paint black and white or paint limited palette, try that. And you'll see that it's value. So I'm going with my darks now, just because the darks establish the drawing. Just like when you're drawing on white paper, think about it. What are you drawing on? You're drawing darks on white paper. So a little bit of a color screw up there. Picked up some white by accident. I always think sometimes when I make mistakes on these, whether it's on these or even in class, I think it's good for people to see that everything doesn't go perfectly. Sometimes you make mistakes and you have to figure out your way out of them. And I think that's part of painting. I also think it's one of the beautiful aspects of painting, the simple fact that it's never always the same. You know, I think all artists to a degree are formula painters. You find a formula that works for you. And some of those formula artists are subject, oriented. In other words, they don't like to stray away from a subject they're comfortable with. And I think that happens more as you're developing your overall abilities. I think once you develop it, then you'll try some things. You'll stretch yourself, so to speak. Okay, let's continue getting those darks. And darks, I'm using blue and brown, pretty much. Blue meaning ultramarine, brown meaning umber. I'm using this gesso brush like I usually do. Quite often I'll use this brush on almost all forms of painting, whether it's sometimes, unless I'm doing a real portrait, maybe, then I don't start with this. But other than that, I start with it quite a bit. I didn't used to. I discovered it a couple of years ago. I don't know how. I just picked it up, started messing with it, and all of a sudden I went, hey, I just learned something. So it may be uncomfortable for some of you, and it may be just what the doctor ordered for others. Okay, we're getting that in there again. I'm adding a little more terp to it now, simply because I feel like you guys can hear me rubbing. It means I'm working pretty hard to get that paint to go down. And because I'm in a somewhat of a time frame, I want it to go down faster. And so when that happens, I will add terp. And terp can do a couple things. A lot of contemporary young painters like the drips that creates with terp. I think that's, if you like that, great. If you don't do it. If it hurts, don't do it. Now let's get that tire in. So we're going to unify this whole foreground really nicely, hopefully.
So you're not worried about adding in variation of color within the shadow?
Not right now.
Okay.
Color variation shouldn't happen until you're far enough along. You know, I put a little color variation in here as I talked, and I was just doing that because I was going along and it was bothering me. And so I figured I better get a little bit of color variation started back there. And the other thing, if you're focused on your lights, as we are here, the primary part of the painting is all lit, with the exception of these whites. But darks will tend to go together. In other words, darks will tend to show less color in the shadows, and probably almost no color variation in the shadows. Lights, on the other hand, in the shadow can show a lot, because lights will reflect more outside color. So it's just something kind of to keep in mind. And I mean, it's pretty obvious here. In this case, that's a white, that's in shadow. Now, the shadow is influenced in this case, and this goes back to a question that was asked a little bit ago. The shadow is influenced by the sky, not by the sun. The sun influences the lights, the sky influences the shadows. But there's a third factor to always consider. The third factor is the downward planes that aren't necessarily receiving skylight, and they're not getting sunlight. So what are they? Well, they tend to have a little bit more warmth than the areas using skylight. So if you think of it, awnings under a house, under maybe where it's painted white, the awnings will go kind of blue, and then the cast shadow won't have skylight. So the cast shadow may be a little bit on the slightly warm side. And so, that's where color variation becomes really fun. But value first, color second. And that's why I have actually friends that are artists that do everything almost, if you think of an imprimatura underpainting where it's all in value, or a really tight charcoal drawing, and you've worked out all your values. One of my friends says, once you've worked your values out, all you have to do is figure out the color from there, and there's paint right on top of it, which is true. But, I think, once again, it's a great way to learn, but I don't think it has the final charm, and I'm giving you opinion, as a direct paint, an alla prima painting. Now, if you're going to paint super realistic, like an Alma Tadema, Bouguereau, people like that, I think sometimes it's really beneficial to get that monochromatic type underpainting down. Okay, so we've got pretty much the darks laid in, at least in this area. There's a dark right here under this. Let's put it in. Oh, picked up some, look at that, by accident. Sometimes you get that and you go, hey, I'm going to keep that. Well, I didn't. Okay. So we started getting kind of the basics of the drawing down. We're about 25 minutes into it. So a little, maybe I'd like to be a little farther along, but I don't feel constrained. In other words, I don't feel like it's a bad thing. I put a little bit of darks in the interior so I don't have to worry about it later. I know I will come back. Just because you put them in once doesn't mean they're in there to stay and everything's 100% perfect. It just means, I think of everything as I lay it in as kind of an attempt to be accurate with color and value, but a placeholder. Placeholder meaning that I can go back at any time and revise it. And why would I want to revise it? Because I might realize it doesn't work the way I had hoped that it might when I first laid it in. So, just at some point you want to get back. I haven't gotten back from this yet. I'll tell you why. For me right now, I don't have enough on there for me to get back. But I'm going to, as I say it, I'm going to stand back right now. And I'm looking more at perspective, which is pretty good. Okay, I was looking more at perspective there, just to kind of make sure things were working the way I wanted them to. A little bit, I just noticed I could put some more green right in there. A little bit brighter. So that in here, just smear it around a little bit. As long as I've got it on the brush, where else do I see brighter greens? So what happens every time I mix that type of green, I'm mixing a variation. I'm never mixing the exact same color. I'm actually trying to get the right value. But if the color is different, I'm going with whatever that different color is. So the variations that you start mixing work for you. All right, let's start to get a little bit of this basic area in, then the figures, and then we can start going back and illuminating it, because we really haven't dealt with illumination. The other thing to keep in mind with regarding to illumination, this is not white. That's white. So you can see how far away from white I am. All right, so the sky isn't even white. That's important to know. It's important to know. It's important to understand that you're illuminating later on. You're not illuminating right from the outset. So when I was teaching down south, I used to just tell students, if it looks like a dark lay-in for a watercolor, then you're probably right. This is where you can add texture and all kinds of fun stuff. So let's get that, the side of that cart, which is white in shadow, so it's very blue. It's kind of a warm blue as we face this way, and kind of a cooler blue on the side. So I'm cleaning my brush, pretty good, but I never care if there's remnants in there. So I'm going to use the light blue. Start with that over here. I'm going to add white to it, and it's way too bright of a blue. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a little alizarin, which is going to take it a little bit towards a violet, and we're coming close to what I want. Maybe a little bit more. And I'm going to take some medium, a little more white, a little more alizarin. And I went to violet right away. So back to adding in a little more blue and a little more white. And thus are the perils of mixing colors. You go too far, and I'm going to try this. It's probably, I'm going to dull it down with a little brown. It's a little cleaner of a blue than I want right off the bat. A little bit. So I've thrown a little bit of umber into it. Okay, where to go? I'm going to kind of stumble over some of those lines so I kind of keep them in without completely losing them. Perspective here. It gets darker as it moves back. And I can see it also get a little warmer here and there. So I'm going to take a little raw sienna to that. And what the raw sienna did is it not only warmed it up, but it darkened it a little bit. So I had to add some white. So if you look, so a little bit of a color variation going on, which is adding more what reality is. It's just probably stains all over these things, these carts. I should know that. I've been on many a harvest and seen all this.
So Bob wants to know, is the dark behind the wheel reflected or
Is what?
shadow?
The dark behind
the wheel, is it reflected or shadow on the cart?
this is, it's reflected. It is in shadow. Yes, the light is coming from, so if we had a cube like this, the light is coming from here. It cannot light that side of the cube. It's lighting what is ever in front of it, reflecting a warmer color back into it. And when I use the word warmer, I really mean it in a subtle sense. I don't mean it gets orange, because, you know, when I say warm, sometimes people go, oh, red? Does that mean I need more alizarin? No, brown is warmer than blue, for example. So sometimes it's just a matter of that. Now, if you want to push it and you want to take it to a little bit of a warmer, then you can add a little orange into it. You can add all kinds of different things. But keep it underdone in the beginning. I really highly recommend that, rather than make it, you know, really strongly, because too much color, in my opinion, can destroy a piece. I'd rather see a piece be understated in color, and have really beautiful value that really starts to pull it all together. So we've kind of got this area here laid in. I scribbled in these, but they're off. They're not correct. So we're just kind of a little variation in that color. And as it comes forward, we're going to warm it up. So I'm going to, first one I'm going to do is adding some white, and I'm adding some brown. And that'll take it to a warmer color like that. That's pretty good. I'm going to add a little bit of, oh, I went too far with it. A little bit of a raw sienna to that. And there's value variation within this. It's not like it's one clean flat color. So there might be some blues, there might be a little bit more warm here and there. I find sometimes by just scuffing around on it, you're going to come up with something that works, and it's going to take it out of this realm of being one flat tone. I always refer to these one flat tone things as like monopoly houses, where they're just, it's, you get a yellow house, no windows, nothing on it. You get a green house and all those types of things. So you're almost better sometimes to be a little off and go back and fix that color a little later, because by doing that, you create more interest. For example, I see stains down in here. So I've just went back to my real dark color and I'm just kind of throwing some stains. Now, to me, those are a little too cold. So I make the stains a little more brown and get some, just by scuffing it up a little bit. And then we'll go back to the base tone and get that in there. Want to cover it all. First thing we want to do is get it covered. Second thing is neaten it up and do whatever value variations, as someone asked earlier, do color and value variations. The more time you have, the more you can do that. The less time you have to worry about just getting everything in there that you want. So, you've got a little bit of a problem happening. Now there's some darks back in here. So I mixed up kind of a dark right into that color. It's too dark. That's pretty good. Come straight up right there. Just want to indicate it. Okay. And clean it up here. A little bit underneath. We just kind of scuff it a few times. Boy, I can see the underplane. Show you something. This is what, right under this little ridge, it gets really warm and there's some oranges in there. So I put orange back in my brush. Look what I did. And I went to orange, but I don't mind it, because what I do is kind of go back and take that blue color, just kind of mess it up a little bit. Okay. Now it adds some vitality. It adds a little bit of interest to this otherwise. And I'm going to take the color that's kind of brown, but it's more of a gray. It's like a warm gray. And we're going to come right here. Too dark, but I'm going to just try to push it back into that other color. One here. Back here. And then right by his leg, I notice it gets really dark right there. And there's a little light that happens in. So at least that gives me a starting point. I can go back, clean this up a little bit. See, I had some dirty paint in there. I don't care, because the dirty paint, once again, adds something. Now you take a look, you get a little bit of a reflected shadow almost, because the skylight can't get to it, from the tire up here. See it? So some of the stuff, if I can get it in now and make it just kind of abrupt, it's not that important anyway. It just needs to feel correct. Okay, so we're going to leave that alone for right now. If I have time later, I'll try and fix it. If I don't have time later, it's done. One part that I would like to get that I didn't get in the outset is right down here. It's a little too blue. Throw some ochre, or excuse me, raw sienna back into it. Raw sienna tends to work well right here. And okay, I like the kind of sloppy color that's happening up in here. I'm very happy with that. This is a little dull and flat to me, but that's okay. It's just the way it is. Maybe I'll liven it up, throw a little extra blue into it, and I can throw a little extra brown up on this side. And we'll just, that helps turn the corner. And it's a little bit lighter up right on the corner. Don't want to do that until I start worrying about my lights in general. And I'm not there yet. I'm still, in fact, I don't like the fact I've left lights in here, just simply because I'd rather have to paint over a color. So we've got some basics laid in. Let's get, this is pretty easy. We're going to lean it towards an ochre with a little yellow in it. little more ochre. Let's see what that looks like. Good enough. Okay. That's pretty good. It gets a little yellower as it goes around this, on this side a little wider, or I can take it the other way and add a little brown to it and make it a little darker over here, which just felt better. Okay, so we're gonna leave that alone. Let's get a little bit of the figures going, and then everything will be kind of laid in. Oh, you know what I do need to do though, I didn't do, is the bucket that he's holding. So I'm gonna take the blue and a little bit, I see a little more violet into that color. The blue and the alizarin, the light blue and the alizarin and white. And let's see what happens with this. Boy, that's not bad. Shocked me. Do I sound surprised when I hit? I am. I'm not used to doing it necessarily the first time. Usually I want to make 2 or 3 adjustments. I try on quick paintings, I try and leave it at 2 adjustments. 1 trial, 2 adjustments. But if you're doing a finished painting, if you need 30 adjustments, take them. It's just that don't psych yourself out, because I've seen people do that. They, it's not right, it's not right, it's not right, and nothing's right. It's like if you put enough lines down somewhere, one of those lines are correct. Okay, the same is true with if you mix your colors and paint. Sometimes you just have to go with it. Trust yourself a little bit more. Don't be afraid to be wrong. I know I've said this in a lot of these live painting sessions. Don't be afraid to be wrong. I really mean that, because I think that could be one of the things that holds people back very often. Now let's come up with the basic gray, not the dark, but the basic gray of that. So for grays, as you guys know, I use basically blue, ultramarine, brown, and then for value, white. So that's what I did. I mixed blue, brown, and white together. It's maybe a little cooler than it is warm. So let's try, it should be darker than this. Pretty good. Okay, gonna add a little, it feels sticky, so I added a little bit of medium to it. And that's something I do instinctively, and I'm saying it out loud so that you all understand, because as you're painting, same thing may happen. If it feels a little sticky and you're having to work too hard to get that paint to go down, it just means add a little bit more medium. Now this is one of these areas where I would see people draw every wrinkle in and then paint every wrinkle as an individual element. One of the things about painting quickly is you can't do that. You have to paint the bulk in, and it's a form of simplification or editing. One way to look at it. Now, as it goes down to his forearm, it gets darker. So I just took some of the dark that I had mixed up, and it was too cold, so I warmed it up just there, and went darker right here. But I'm not putting all those little wrinkles in that you might see. A little, right there. Okay, and back on the back arm, it's quite dark, so we're going to take the blue and the brown together. And maybe under this arm, as long as I've got that nice dark color mixed. I mix some red and green. Sometimes I'll do that just to vary the shadows so they don't all have the exact same, but those will still give you really good darks. So we're coming up round, and then we want to come across and do that nice softening into the, and a little bit of one there, and then boy, I see a lot of warmth. So I just threw orange back into that color, down in this reflection, down the lower part of the arm. All right, so we're going to go to the back again. I want to get this, all this dark in. So if anything, all I have to do is add a light on top here and there. Okay, let's leave him alone for a little bit, okay? Except for the, oh wait, let's get the head in. Oh, and the pants, as long as I've got that color mixed up, make it a little bluer, so it's dark. If I have to add a little white to it, and then let's come in. Nope, I'm gonna go a little lighter, just a little bit. Has a little bit more blue in it than I was working with before. And we'll go here, here. We'll put whatever folds in that I feel it needs. Back on the calf, and then blend it by just putting it right back into that other color. Up on his buttocks right there and right there. And then I'll light the other leg in a little bit. So we have a little bit of that laid in. Now, hat, really dark. So I've got some brown already laid down here, just mixed blue into it. Hat is a little on the blue side, probably. We're just going to pop that hat and we're going to run it, let it become his hair. His hair bunches out a little bit from that hat. So we can bring it out just a little bit. Oh, give him a little ponytail there, which could be okay. Not doing a portrait of him. I'm painting a guy, not necessarily that guy. I'm using that guy. It's something I've said to people in a head painting class, because I've taught both head painting classes and I've taught portrait painting classes. So in head painting classes, you're painting a head. Don't sweat make it a convincing head. If it doesn't look exactly like the person, that's not the goal. The goal is the structure of a head. Make it feel like it's appropriate. Now, as long as I've got this dark in here, rather than mix it up later, I'm going to do this guy's hair. And while I've got it, normally I wouldn't do this, but let's put these big blacks in that I see right here. I see one pattern, because I do like the pattern. Normally I will avoid pattern, but in this case, it breaks up the monotony. The only thing that would make it better is if it were a red shirt, but then it almost would command too much. So I kind of like the pattern. I think it's just a nice little touch, and it's going to be kind of fun to try and make it feel accurate. And then we lighten it up a little bit with some white. And we put the grayer pattern in, which I see here on this one. Whoops. I threw some maples into it. There we go. That feels better. Probably not dark enough, but there. I actually see it get a little on the warm side. So I just came back, mixed a little bit of the cad orange hue into that color. Yeah, that feels good. A little warmer even. It's pretty good. It's working okay. Sorry, I don't mean to sound over impressed with myself when I say that's good. Actually, I mean it more as, wow, I'm surprised I'm just making it as a statement, meaning, well, I don't have to go back and try and fix that. But I will if I need to. If I need to fix something, by gosh, I'm going to go back and adjust it if it bothers me. And that's where that refinement stage comes in. I've mentioned that most paintings go through 3 stages: lay-in, modeling, and refinement. Now, lay-in and modeling can also occur at the same time. But refinement is really something you do more towards the end. You take what you've done and you make it better. And that's what that refinement stage is all about, making it better. A little around dark on the cuff, but not quite all the way to black. But if it goes black, it's fine with me. So we've got a little bit of pattern going on there. Now, let's get some flesh tones in there. We'll see where we're at. I'd like to have everything kind of laid in except some of the yellows with a half an hour to go. That's my goal. Okay. So I'm going to set my little trusty brush down and get a new rag here. And I'm going to pick up, what do I have here? I'm going to This is smaller, but what the hell? It's a little smaller than I want. It's a number 4. If I had a 6 handy, that's what I'd be using. You know, it sounds like I'm choosing golf clubs. Give me a number 6. Just realize that. I don't play golf. Played golf when I was about, I was telling a friend of mine just recently, I said, the last time I played golf was when I was 19 years old. Isn't that amazing? And you know what? I wasn't that good then. I liked it. It was fun, but I wasn't that good. And then I went to college and I got literally away from it. I never got back into it. I know it's a wonderful game. There's probably a lot of people out there love it. The best part about it, gets you outside. But it's one of the reasons I can get a lot of paintings done, I think. People say, well, how do you get so many paintings done in a year? Well, I don't play golf. I don't play computer. I use a computer when I need it, but I don't play on it. I've never, ever, I'm not bragging, I've never played a computer game. What was it? I was looking on Facebook. Someone said the Kardashians or something in their 20th year. And I'm proud to say I've never watched one episode. Somebody mentioned that. I thought that was kind of funny. Put a like by it and said, me too. There's a lot of wonderful little stuff I can do in there. The front of his face gets a lot of reflected light. I'm going to take raw sienna, a little bit of the cat orange, and just a touch of white because I want to go make it a little lighter. I think I'm going to bring a little more ochre into it. Let's try this. Right. Whoa, that was a mistake, but I like it. I'm going to keep it. In other words, I went a lot warmer than I had planned. But you know what? Sometimes those mistakes come out to help. So little jam. Now the other guy's face has a lot more orange in it, so I can actually use a color I was just working with. And the front of it, I can sit there and analyze and probably figure out why. It's primarily reflected light, just so you know. Nose gets a little bit darker on the side of the nose. That's too dark, but I'll live with it. And then it gets darker back here. And the ear is warm, but it's not bright. So I have a warmer red already mixed up, and I'll just use that. And then come in on the side of his face. And we've got kind of his face laid in. Now, while I've got that color already mixed up, let's get the hands in. They're flesh too, right? In this case, it's a little darker, and he has a light hitting on the very top of his hand, and it's moving down this direction. So I'm just looking for the movement of the hand. The other hand is almost the same color and value, quite red, and it comes from the cuff, and then his thumb sticks out, and then his forefinger, and his other fingers are bunched, and it's still about the same value now that I see, about similar color. And that's about it. Okay, so we've got pretty much, I don't like the ear on this guy, by the way. Let me fix it. Okay, now I like it. Let's get his hat in. I think that's an important factor. And then we have most of the darks laid in. I do see one area that I do want to go into, and I put my brush down there it is. I'm going to go really dark, take the red, the green, the blue, and we're going to go right on the interior of that bucket that he's holding. Right there. Right. And it comes down, out, and some of the darks seep their way down into this. And so we'll put some nice darks down in here, maybe add a little bit more green. It's going a little brown as we move down into the grapes itself. This is the fun stuff. If you got time at the end, it's just a matter of painting feeling. So we've got that dark, which is one of the things I felt was missing as far as laying in my darks. A little bit better perspective on the elliptical aspect of that. Okay, now I'm going to get his hat in. His hat is this behind his hat, by the way, it's got to be dark right back here. So I'm going to throw a nice dark right there because that's what's going to make that hat work. If I don't get the dark in there, it's not going to work. Okay, so we want to do the shadow of the hat, which is probably about the same value as this. So I'm going to take white, and it has a little bit of coolness to it. I'm going to take a little blue, a little ochre. It's a little too dark. I'm going to keep my eye up there. Oh, I threw some brown and it went way too hot on me. So let's try this. Maybe too dark. Yep. Naples yellow to it. I want it to be almost the value. There we go. It's almost the same value as what I'm painting on. That is. And it's just, it's warms and cools and it's a slight amount of yellow. And I see on the front of it, as it comes down, it gets reflected from his face. So it gets slightly warmer down here. Okay. And then it gets a little bit more of that crease up there. Okay. Let's leave that alone. Now let's start in and work on some of these lights, work from the background up. So I'm going to start with some of the, I got a number 8 here. So I'm going to start with some of the Naples yellow, a little green, a little yellow, and a little white. A little more yellow, a little bit ochre thrown in. I don't want to go too, let's try it. Maybe a little too fast, but throw a little more green, a little more yellow. There, let's leave it at that. Okay. This isn't the lightest. This is one stage. It would probably be if I were doing a studio painting, which is probably about 4 more stages before I get to the final light. But in a quicker painting like this, I'll go to it in the next stage. It'll be 2 stages of light. Then I might have time to go back and fuss a little, but I don't know if I do. Just putting marks down kind of as I see them. And if I'm wrong, I really don't care because the actual vines could grow differently. They don't. So I'm using what I see, but if I don't hit every little mark in the right spot, it doesn't matter as long as I'm approximate. We're approximating. Let's step back. Yeah, that feels okay. That feels about right. Probably a little darker than I might want it, but not a lot. So we're going to come up here, keep going. Got to keep medium in it because I'm painting on paint. Use different parts of your brush. See, I'm painting little dabs. I caught myself feeling like I was painting little dabs, and that's why I brought that up. Step back, looks okay. Front of the hat. Behind the face, I'm going to go back, pick up that small brush I was using, the number 4. So I've got a 4 and an 8 right now. Bless you.
Thank you.
And up front of the face. Too much. Lose it. Behind. Oh, nice. Up in here. Mix up a little bit more. A little white, a little yellow, a little green, and a little ochre. It's a little lighter. A little more ochre, a little more green. There we go. And medium. Under the arm, I'm going to go a little lighter. I'm going to throw some Naples back into it right here. Feel I can get by with it. So a little darkness, but I'm not going to use it. I'm going to Feel like I'm making the same stroke too many times. Sometimes I want little dabs and sometimes a long pulling area. Step back. Okay. Talking to myself when I say that, not to you guys, but that's the kind of stuff I'll do if I'm painting on my own very often. So I do talk to myself way too much. It's probably because I'm used to talking to all of you and I miss you. A little yellow, a little white back into the same color, going a little lighter. Now you notice I've lightened the background, that deep background, which means I probably have to go lighter on the leaves to get them to stand out to the same degree. So we're gonna go here. Big, big, small. Step back. Okay. I want to have time to give it one more layer. So I want to get it in there pretty quick and be nice and bold about it. Back to my 8. Sometimes you take these bigger brushes and you just let part of the brush hit and it'll make a more interesting mark that is probably a little bit more reminiscent of what you're trying to paint than if you try and overforce that and draw that mark in too accurately right from the outset. Learn how to use your brush to create the illusions of things as opposed to painting every exact detail of what it is you're depicting. Let the viewer's imagination do a little bit of the work. I went overboard on that, but for right now, that's where it's going to stay. Well, I kind of like that mark. I don't know if it's right or not, but I sure like it. Down in here, a lot more yellow, but I'll put that back on top. Let's get an underpinning down before I go one stage lighter. So we need to go on the cart and we need to go on the characters a little bit. So we want to get enough of this in here. Where are we at? Okay, almost 30 minutes in. I was hoping to have everything in with a half an hour to go, and I'm going to be close. Sometimes by twisting your brush, letting it kind of move into some of the color, you're going to automatically mix up some green variations, even though it's because it's intermixing with the color that's down there. So, and you want green variations, by God, because these are green, but we don't want them acidy green, and greens are hard to use as it is. So now as we move down, it gets quite yellow. So I've added a lot of yellow and little maples to that color. And let's get at least this part of it in. A little ochre maybe mixed into that, huh? So we get some little variations, some greens in there too. I see I can eventually get into. Okay, we got enough of the greens in. I got to move into some other areas. I see them down in here a little bit back in here. Just little touches. That's the kind of stuff I probably I'm going to add in at the end, maybe even with a knife. Okay, let's go back into my figures now. You know, I'm leaving this alone. It's not as important, so if I just have a couple minutes, I'll throw something in there. I'm going to put that part in, too dry, add more medium. There we go. And while I've got that color, geez, it's working well. So let's get a little bit of feeling on that wheel. Okay, that's enough. It's a little warmer right here. So I just mixed, same color, just threw it back into one of the flesh tones that I had mixed. We'll get a little bit of the top of that. That's a reflected light. So we've got a little bit of that mixed in there. Do want to do a little bit of more work on the card itself, but right now we're going to try and finish these guys off. They're going to be kind of the focal point. So I want them to have enough information. I think the first thing I'll do is grab a little bit of a darker color in the flesh, and we'll put a feeling where that eye is and underside of the nose. And I don't think I'm going to do a lot more to that right now. On this guy, we see his face a little more clearly. So we're going to get the hair back in. It's a dark, so I'm using my blue and brown, just so you know. He has a mustache, which I think adds a lot of character right there. And it is very dark as it comes up from behind his garment, right in there. Just like in there, it's a little darker too. Okay. A little bit of an eye, at least an eye socket. The number 4. Okay. And he is going to have a little light hitting on the front, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I am, however, going to catch the front of his forehead right there. And I'm going to take the color I was using on the sky, which I actually still have mixed up here. Maybe add a little bit of white to it. A little bit of white. And some medium, because I need to get a nice narrow tip on my number 4 here. So that's your 4, but look at it, like very narrow tip. So I can go in and I can illuminate the back side of that hat, pull it over, get it to go up, and then on the top, look how that illuminated. And the front of his hat, he's got some light right. Nope, I'm mixing it into the other paint too much. It's got to sit on top. Right, let's try this. That's better. That's the front of his hat. And the back side of his hat, underneath, gets a little reflected light. And I didn't see it earlier, but it's right here. So I added some ochre and some white. And we're going to come in right here. And do that to it. And then we'll leave it. Okay. Would I like to do more? Probably. Don't have time. So we're just, now the front of his hat, I'm going to take that white that I was using, and we're going to hit very, very bright light right there. Back on his hat, and then up, more white, more medium, because the white is pretty stiff. Medium is the solvent-free gel. And I'm going to add a little bit of light on the front of that hat right here, and on top here, and let it fade back here. Okay. A little bit of touch. So it makes him feel complete. That's all we're trying to do right now, is give an indication of them feeling complete so we can move on to other areas. Collar back behind has a little bit more skylight in it, so it's a little lighter, maybe a little bluer, just a little bit right there. And as it comes down his back like that. There, and maybe a little lighter. Okay, so now let's add the light on the front because there's a little bit of a brighter, his t-shirt sticking out from behind and it's pretty light, but it's not too light. So let's take a blue, white, and a little red, and we'll put right there, a little bit of his t-shirt. Now let's illuminate him from the front. All right, so we're going to take the white and the maples, once again, the same two colors that I was using for the sky, some medium, maybe a little turp thrown into that medium. I have some safflower oil, so if I need it to thin it out even more, I'll use the safflower oil, but I'm trying to do it without. So we're going to go right here and then bring it down on his shoulder right about there. I'm putting my little finger down, so I got to be careful. And the front, and on his sleeve, top of his hand, sleeve. And what happens, you guys might be wondering, because I'm not making it the local color is, I mean, the sunlight, we're focusing so much on the shadow that the sunlight is, no matter what the local color, local value, if it's basically light, it's almost the same color. So it's not, we're not using a lot of different colors. I got a little sloppy there. Go back to the shadow, which I already have mixed up, and another little part. And we just kind of clean it up a little bit. There and there. And we're good. Now he looks illuminated. All of a sudden, it's odd because all of a sudden he begins to look finished. And I didn't do a lot more. It's because I set him up properly. Put a dark blue and brown down here to define that. Whoops. Absolutely picked up a little extra white. I didn't mean to. And we can go in and we can re-emphasize any of the folds that I did earlier that I didn't refine as much. So we do a little bit of that towards the end, maybe a little bit of reflected light on that back leg right about here. And you just have to decide how far you want to take it. You can go way too far with it and make it way too important. And if you're going to make a mistake, underdo it. Understate. You can always go back and overstate later if you need to. Picked up some more white, didn't mean to. It's because I have the light of mixed up right next to it. And when I'm being so quick as I pick this up, that I'm sometimes messing up and getting a little bit of light in there. So there we go. So under the, whoops, got some more white in there. I saw it. There we go. And maybe a little bit more reflective light down towards here, a little bit. It's a matter of adding a little white right now to almost any of the grays for some of the reflected lights. I want to get this guy, and we don't want to take too long. I'm going to do the lights in two phases. Number one, the lights in shadow, which I don't have, which are going to be very similar to the value that I have down there. They're not real warm and they're not real cold. So we're going to go right here. Let's try that. Nope, I want to go a little lighter. A little bit lighter. Let's try it again. A little lighter. Added a lot of white that time. A little medium. Try it again. Okay, I think we're okay. These are lights in shadow. And there could be color, and I know somebody asked earlier about color, but yeah, there could be color variations. I don't have really the time to play with all the subtle color variations, and I don't want to get too carried away with it because it's not a major part of the picture. Okay, so let's get the brighter lights in now. See if we can make those work. See a dark, I could, so you could re-emphasize some of these darks like right here. Okay, let's put the brighter lights in because it's really kind of an indication anyway. It's not a rendering. So let's put the light on the can, just right here. I should have done that while I was putting lights elsewhere, but wasn't aware of it at the time, so I'm aware of it now, and I want to get that helps define that hand. And then there's no light down here. It's just up in that region. Looks like it's sneak back here just a touch. Now the same light that I'm using, which is a white Naples, we're going to use on the back of this guy, and it's going to start here, and it's going to come down his back, and I'm intermixing to other colors, so I'm getting kind of a. There we go. I don't like. I'm going to put some safflower oil into that because it just is intermixing too much. It's not laying on top. That's better. We want to make it feel complete. White, pure white. Mixed right into that color. There we go. Now it may start as pure white, but it doesn't end up there because it's intermixing. Just so you know. A lot of times people go, well, you don't use pure, sometimes you use pure white. But a lot of times as you use it, it intermixes with the other colors and it's no longer, so it's a lightening agent is what I like to think of it as. Okay. That's good enough. Guy's working. Let's leave it alone. Start to get some of this in here, some lights back in here, and then we'll try and finish some of this area up. Okay, first thing, let's start on the grapes in the interior. I'm going to use this brush, white, and mix Naples yellow back into that yellow green I was using earlier. And I'm going to throw a little bit extra yellow into it. So it's a white yellow. And I'm going to take some medium, a little bit of the medium I have, mix it in because I'm going to be laying on a lot of wet paint. It's working, and it's mainly working because my values are right. Colors are pretty good, but the values are right. And that's why I say I'm going to grab a little bit of raw sienna here, mix it in with that color, and I'm going to get some warms, transitional warms in some of those areas right in there, here. I could have put some of these warms down earlier, but didn't. So we're in, again, I intermixed them because as I was painting, it was automatically intermixing with other colors. I need some more darks right in here and here, and breaking this up a little bit more down. And then we need some bright lights coming back on top. So I got to clean my brush, go back and pick up the color I was just using, and we'll come in and we'll start right here. White, yellow mixed into the color I had, and medium. And the medium allows the paint to sit on top, keeping that in mind. If I do too many strokes though, I start picking up that under color. Now, sometimes that works for you because you want a little bit more variation in some of your greens, but if you want a lot of brights, it's going to dull it down. It's not going to work that way. So comes down here. I noticed in the past when I do these demos for you guys, towards the end I get quieter. And I think it's because, well, I've only got so much time. I really got to crank. So I got about 15 minutes. And we still need to get a little bit of this in. So I'm going to break it down into kind of 5, 3, 5, and 8. How's that? And so I'm going to take that color. I'm going to mix that color into kind of some of the other dirty greens I have. And we're just going to put some of these back in shadow. So they're there. Maybe we'll put a little ochre into that color, but they're not, come on, ochre. It's what's standing out enough. There we go. And a little bit of the sparkle right in here. A little bit more of the green back behind. All right, now we're going to put some ochres over. I'm going to take and get into the leaves now. We're going to put some warms in there and then some cools, warms, some of these ochres and raw sienna. Raw sienna and ochre are quite similar in color. Raw sienna is darker and redder, but they both fall into that kind of very similar range. The raw sienna is considered more of an earth tone, and yellow ochre is considered more of a yellow. I don't see a lot. I see a little bit in here. All right. Let's get a little of the background. It's warm. It's going to be a lot of Naples. So I'm going to take Naples and I'm going to take ochre and start with that. And I'm going to keep it really thick and kind of dry. Here first. Little piece of light here. Here. Mix a little brown into it, a little more raw sienna into it, and a lot more raw sienna up in here behind. So we define the back of his, that's a vine there. Okay. So same color, the yellow ochre, Naples, and raw sienna. Pretty light here. And I've kind of left myself an area. I'm actually painting a color quite similar, and I see a little bit of warm happening. So I brought some of the cat orange into it, and we're going to pop that down here. And then over here. Get a lot of little nice shadow, little piece of light happening here. And there's some detail in that shadow on the ground, and it's really kind of in that brown blue area, little texture. The more time we have, the more of that we can add in there, but you can kind of get the idea. So we're gonna go for the wheel wells in here. It's kind of a off blue, white, and a little brown so it doesn't come out too blue. Let's test it. Not bad. Better than I thought. Okay, so we're going to go up here, over. I'll come back, clean it up. A little bit better curvature here, down in here. And the inner circle. Throw a little bit more blue into it. We'll just kind of bring it from the warm part, which is back in here. Bring it down. It parallels the other curve. So we want to be kind of similar. The same with the back one, has more blue in it, more skylights getting to it. So I just took a little bit more blue into that color. And we'll go 1, 2, and underside. It's a little clumsy. That could be a little neater, but we're running out of time, so I'm not going to. So a little blue and brown together. We'll just clean some of that up a little bit more. Not, and the blue and the brown, and I can come in on this tire, although I kind of like some of the crudeness of it because it's not that neat anyway. And then there's the lug nuts, which are right in here. One is here. One is here. And one here. And so we've kind of broken it up, made it feel correct. And that's, remember what I said in the beginning, that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to get it so the whole thing begins to feel correct. All right. Let's go back into up in here. Oh, I want to put a little bit of a lid. It's kind of a red, kind of a dead red. So I mix brown into it. And we'll just do that up there. And I'm off, but I'm going to leave it. And then there's an area that fits right around. And that could be darker too. So I can go back and I go back dark at one time. Then we're going to go back into the vineyard. And I think I'm going to try a palette knife now. I'm going to bring a Naples, yellow, and white. I'm going to try those three colors together. And maybe a little bit of medium mixed into that. Okay. So here we go. Let's do it. Let's put some brights in here. That's what I was saying about you illuminate it towards the end. So we're just kind of laying it on. I'm having trouble getting it to stick. So sometimes it's really thick. It's probably because the paint underneath is so wet. I'm stepping back. It's working. It's just, I think I probably even whiter and not as much yellow. But for right now, that's where I've got it. So we're going to go here. And I'm going to here. Kind of some big blocky areas. I don't want to just dab it down. And more white. I may come back with a brush and do a little bit of fussing on that. The whole thing's starting to work. I want to put a little bit more into the, maybe have 5 minutes. Let's go back in here. Get some real quick lights going in here. A little bit on here. A couple of big clumsy leaves. So if I use a nice big lay-in. Finally, a little behind him. It's helped define his back a little bit more. And we get a little bit more greens happening down in here. A little underneath. Okay, let's get a little, go right into this tub and maybe fix this barrel a little bit. There's some ribbing on it and I'm going to put it in right now. Nope, a little darker, a little warmer. And he's holding a handle. And we go a little bit lighter. And a little reflective light on the bottom. Okay, let's leave that alone. I can always go back in here and illuminate some of those grapes. But right now, let's get a little bit into this cart and then we'll call it quits because time's about up. So I'm going to run about 5 over. Sorry about that. One there. And we want to keep the same direction. 1, 2, 3, and then over here. 1. And maybe a little darker right here. Not quite. Let's do it again. There's so much thick paint on here, and that's what I'm doing a little struggle with. Now I'm going to come in with a light blue. Not so much blue, a little bit, maybe more. And we're going to come right here and right here. One at the bottom. This will work. Let me grab my liner if I can. 1, 2. And we're going to do 1. This is where, I was going to do this and I didn't even, let's try it. Because sometimes I'll take the scraper and we'll just get the paint on it and do it like that. And you can create the feeling of it a lot better. I'm trying to draw it in. Okay, last thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of dimension in it here and on top. So we're going to go a little lighter as it turns the corner. A little more neutral, maybe a little bit more on the white side, right about here. Nope. I thought I had it. Try it one more time. Better. Okay, I see that. I see a little lighter right here. I see a little lighter right here and here. And there. And the interior, just like here, you get a little bit of light right there and there and last, and then we'll do the top and we'll call it quits. So we got a little bit going on. So as long as I got the color in here, let's clean up the side. Okay. And last but not least, go back to the lightest light I was using, white. Put some terp to it or something. And we're going to try, I'm going to try it actually with, let's see what happens. If I can pull it off. It's working. It's a little clumsy, but so we've lit kind of the top of it. And I want to call it quits. I want to do one last thing if I can find my palette knife here. The white, almost the white I was using, that I was just using with a little bit of the yellow into it. I would come one more time. just laying the paint right on top. That's what I'm trying to do. Pretty much that's it, you guys. I can easily have fun with it. I probably won't. I might come back tomorrow and do something because we're actually going to judge a show, and so I won't be home to fuss on it. So it's going to stay where it is now. And hopefully you guys got enough out of this. I think it's relatively complicated piece for a short period of time, but it did pretty much what I wanted it to. It conveyed the feeling of the harvest, which is one of my favorite things to paint, but some of you may already know that. And I think I just like the activity. I love figure and environment. And that's probably what it is about this that attracts me more than anything. So I want to thank everybody. Thanks, Scott and Anna and everybody at the Academy that helps out in this, and all of the students that I've had in the past and all new people that come in. I love it. Thank you guys. I appreciate you hanging in here. Those of you that do come in and watch for the whole time, it's impressive, humbling, and happy painting, everybody.